enter a montage at the start of a film, like after someone's dead, you know, they're gonna die, so you have to have this really like lovely idea of them that existed. Judy, come on!
You just saw a little showcase there of Dehancer for Premiere Pro. I tried to shoot on a variety of different cameras, most notably my new Osmo Pocket 3. That's fantastic, by the way. There's a bunch of different picture profiles. So there's a like Rec 709E one that I bought, EOS HD Pro Color, I think that's it. S-Log 2, S-Log 3, and that's it. Dehancer reached out to me, which I thought was pretty weird because it's not really a big channel or anything, but yeah, I'm not complaining. They asked for like honest opinions and they didn't want to impose anything. So yeah, like all the kind of opinions are mine. Firstly, why did I choose to review the Premiere Pro version of the plugin? Well, I've been editing in Premiere Pro for about 10 years at this point, so I'm pretty kind of ingrained in that system, and I've tried to switch over to DaVinci Resolve for editing, but I find it a little bit too difficult. I wanted to kind of emulate more of a YouTube video process. Again, that's why I got it for Premiere Pro instead of DaVinci. I don't really like round tripping when I'm making YouTube videos because it's just another barrier and another thing you have to do. On the surface, Dehancer comes across as pretty perfect to me. It's not, you know, flawless, but it's as close to as I think a film emulation plugin can be, that I've found anyway. Now, I've only ever shot 35mm and 120 film, just the standard like Portra, Fuji, some Cine still. I've never actually shot on like 250D or 500T or any of those. If it can invoke that kind of like filmic feeling that we're all after, then that is great. Now, I'm not going to lie, initially Dehancer can be quite overwhelming as you first see it. There's a lot of different categories, I guess you call them, or tabs that you would open, and it goes down the list. The best advice I can give is just play with everything, like slide everything about. Yeah, just undo and just play basically, and then you'll really get an understanding of what each individual thing does. What you can do is Dehancer has some really good manuals available. I didn't read every single thing. What I like to do is have it open as I'm playing around in the plugin and just press Control F on my keyboard and then type in the thing that I'm looking for, and then you just navigate that way. And I think that's a really good way to kind of like, you know, see the different things. So most of the look in Dehancer will come from the film profile. This is where you get to pick your film stock. Pick something that you know the name of, something you've heard of before, or just use the scroll wheel on your mouse and just go like 1, 2, 3 and just like go through every single one. That's what I did. I looked at all of them, and some of my favorites that I came across were Fuji Pro 400H and Cinestill 50D and Cinestill 800T. I think those are the ones, which is pretty funny because the Cinestill stock is actually it's a 35mm stock that is actually just Kodak film stock with the remjet layer removed. So in Dehancer, I actually prefer Cinestill to the 250D or 500T, 800, whatever, like the Kodak equivalent. So I thought that was kind of funny. But yeah, generally, just pick one that you really like the look of. I do this in an adjustment layer on a project basis, and then I'll get into a little bit later how I think some stuff should be used on a per shot basis. But for the most part, just if it looks good, it is good, to be honest. We're not scientists here. Next is the film compression tab, and this actually provides like a really nice highlight roll-off that is kind of where film and digital kind of differ. The general advice is when you shoot film, you want to protect the shadows, but your highlights is just pretty much very recoverable. Like the DR is all up there in the highlights, and the reverse of that is true for digital. You usually have a lot of wiggle room in the shadows, but if you clip the highlights, it's gone. It kind of just like goes off to a complete white. You'll probably see that in this mirror to my left. It's like very bright sun, and it's probably going to clip. Film compression is just, think of it as like a nice highlight roll off. I think it can come on a little bit too strong just out of the box, so I would suggest to use this on a per clip basis and adjust it that way. In my test footage, I was shooting in very, very, very midday sun, which as a DOP, I hate it. The one thing I advise directors against is shooting in midday sun. But unfortunately, the thing that you need to do when you're making like YouTube videos, because most normal people that you go out and not film with, but like I was going on a walk with my girlfriend and she's normal and likes to go out at that kind of time of day. She's not like a little DOP film gremlin like myself, where I like to just shoot the hours of like sunset a little bit before, a little bit after, and then never shoot, and then sunset, sunrise, like, so yeah. Lots of the footage is very real world. Again, why I chose Premiere Pro. Try and use Dehancer in two ways. Use a adjustment layer that's going to be above all of your footage, and use that as like a imagine that as your like film stock, and then on a per project basis, add Dehancer to the clips. Like you can use Premiere Pro where you can copy and then paste attributes. What I would do is like apply an instance of Dehancer with everything unchecked and then check off the things that you want to include. So film compression would probably be one of those things in my opinion. Next is the expand tab. Now this lets you kind of like control your contrast through the black and the white point. You can get really horrible looking results if you push the numbers too high, but that's kind of the case with a lot of Dehancer. Anytime the numbers go too far in one direction, you're going to get like too gross of a look. You want to be really subtle with Dehancer. Just use it really subtly and just use it as like a little fine polish. If your footage looks rubbish and you've shot it poorly and exposed it poorly, Dehancer's not going to save it. I mean, it's going to make it look better, and sometimes like shittily shot footage is like in sometimes, but anyway, yeah. If it looks rubbish in camera, it's not going to be saved by Dehancer. By default, the print tab is weirdly set to linear. I guess my understanding of like the linear color space is it's a good starting point for color grading, so maybe that's why it did it. I don't really understand why it chose linear. Anyway, in my testing, I chose to use Kodak Endura glossy paper. I preferred that to the Fuji and Kodak film print emulation. It seemed to have like less of a pink or bluey green color cast, and it was just more neutral and provided kind of like a slightly better base for contrast in my opinion. So I ended up with I'd recommend using the Kodak Endura Glossy. The color head tab is where you can really make the film stock you choose your own. If you're from the photography world, it's very similar to Lightroom's split toning or color grading tab. You can really pick different colors based on I think it starts off where you pick colors on a global level. I think it's CMY maybe. After that, you can pick colors based on a shadows, midtones, highlights level. And a look that I'm quite enjoying in my photography at the moment, that I'm kind of trying to translate a little bit to my video or film stuff, is actually quite like cooling off the highlights and warming up the shadows and then leaving the midtones untouched. I kind of experiment with this. Sometimes I do it in the midtones and then leave the shadows untouched, because I know you're supposed to, with subtractive saturation, keep the shadows desaturated, but I don't know how to do that in Premiere. But yeah, it's just a look that I like, where a cool highlight and then the opposite of a shadow, which is opposite advice to the standard like teal and orange look, which is like warm highlights, cool shadows. But yeah, it's just a look that I kind of like to my semi-trained eye, which in terms of this is not very much. The grain in Dehancer is probably the best I've seen. I used to use Film Convert Pro a lot in Premiere, and that was really good too, but Dehancer is just like next level. It's really good. I really like it. It looks like thick, chunky. It's got like a life to it. Yeah, it just looks really good in my opinion. So the best thing you can do is select a preset that you like. I think I went with like, start with 35mm, and then you go to custom, and then it retains those settings, and then you can play from there. Typically, the higher up the list you go, the chunkier the grain, and then the lower down the list you go, the finer the grain. So the lower the number, like 8mm, that's gonna have big chunky grain, and then 65mm is gonna have really like fine grain. So just bear that in mind. Next up is halation, a look that I think is pretty key to emulating the film look. From my limited knowledge, it's a weird thing that film does where it essentially adds like a red outline around the highlights. I think motion picture stock actually has what's called a remjet layer, which kind of tries to avoid this, and that's where some people don't like CineStill, because it removes that and it essentially means the halation goes a bit nuts. I really like the look personally, and it's something that I was always trying to get but couldn't really figure out how. I know there's ways you can do it in After Effects and DaVinci, but I'm pretty lazy and not that technical, so to have it in like one plugin that does everything is great. So I picked one of the remjet remove layers and just went a bit nuts, because I just really like halation. Bloom is next, and that in tandem with halation is going to be where you get most of your mileage, where if you ignored the color, this is what's going to be, in my opinion, most of the film look. Again, I'm not too familiar with what it is. I use a diffusion filter a lot on professional jobs when I'm shooting digitally, as a way to kind of like emulate that with a physical thing. On this test footage, no diffusion filter was used. I just used the bloom in Dehancer, and I think it looks really good. Halation and bloom together just make it look filmy, in my opinion. The film damage effect can be pretty cool if you're going for more of like a 8mm, 16mm aesthetic, something where you want it to look like a bit scratchy, like home movie kind of esque stuff. I turned it off for this because I generally preferred the other stuff as opposed to the damage. Same for the film breath, the gate weave, and the overscan. Now I can definitely see how all of these things in tandem could be used to create like a very cool little like transitional element, or maybe if you wanted to go for something that very much looks like Super 16 maybe, it could be very cool. But I kind of classed all of these as a separate thing with the film emulation, because if you look at most motion picture stuff, like I used to watch Indiana Jones and Star Wars as a kid, there probably is like some gate weave and breath and stuff on that, but like you can't really tell. I say that now, but I could be completely wrong. I hope not. But yeah, anyway, I left all of these settings off, but I can for sure see how I would use these if, for example, my footage was really rubbish on like a client job and I need it to look good and like trick the client maybe. Yeah, that's probably where I would use them. I generally don't like a global vignette, but I was kind of surprised when I turned this on. It looked really, really good. I think I would maybe use this on a per clip basis again, and especially where I have very central compositions, that's where I'd use it. But unfortunately, I couldn't find a way that you can like shift the vignette like you do with the radial filter in Lightroom. I use that a lot actually in my photography. I use a lot of like filters that go like this, filters go like this, and then the radial and reverse it like a vignette. So, but yeah, I liked the vignette in Dehancer, but I probably wouldn't use it on every shot. The monitor tab's cool. It lets you view your image in false color, and if you don't know what false color is, it's basically how predator sees, predator vision. It's like, that's like thermal, but essentially what it does is it maps your image to every color has an IRE value. So it's a very visual way to understand scopes and color grading. And I use it a lot on set, on professional jobs. I have a small HD monitor and I'm always like triggering the false color to check my exposure on the log image. I don't really use it in color grading too much. I prefer to use the scopes and just like understand it that way, but it's all like a roundabout way of doing the same thing. So yeah, it's a cool feature to have. And as a side note, what I used to do when I was like trying to understand how cinematographers light is I downloaded the Time in Pixels false color plugin. This was a recommendation based on the Wandering DP stuff, where he said he would watch films in false color, and it was a really good way to understand contrast ratios and like what makes a film look. And that goes back to what I was talking about, like it's so much about the lighting as well. So yeah, that's, I guess, a bonus. You could do that. You could watch some stuff in false color and not use Dehancer. Yeah, it's cool. The output tab is also very cool. You can like, if you've really over dialed in your look because you got really excited at how cool Dehancer is and you just like turned everything up to 11 and you're like, oh wow, this doesn't look like film. It looks more like a digital interpretation of film. You can just like roll it back really nicely and just make it more subtle, you know, because subtlety is pretty key. This is actually pretty similar to how I grade in DaVinci. Is I will add a kind of like look adjustment and I'll really overdo it, and then I'll go to the key, I think is what it's called in DaVinci, the opacity, and then just roll it back, and you can kind of like, it's a much better way, I think, of dialing in an individual thing. But on this, in this way with Dehancer, it's like on a overall basis. So it's just nice to kind of like at the end maybe just roll it back, see if you've overdone it, and if you haven't, you just roll it back up. So yeah, super handy to have. It looks like you can export out LUTS from Dehancer, which is pretty cool. I haven't really played with that too much. I don't really use LUTS too much anymore in my workflow, but yeah, I thought it was pretty cool. I don't know what's to stop people from downloading Dehancer and going through the different film profiles and then just exporting out a LUT for that and then releasing a LUT package for film emulation. Maybe you'll see that in the near future. Maybe I'll do a LUT package now. I don't know. But I thought it was pretty interesting that you could maybe use it for an in-camera viewing LUT, or say you've got the plugin for Premiere, but you want to send it out to like DaVinci or something, or maybe you want to work with a colorist and you want to create, and you're not a very good colorist yourself, you use Dehancer, get the colors from that, export out the LUT, send it to your colorist and be like, that's how I want it to look. So yeah, useful. So yeah, that is everything in terms of the features available to you in Dehancer. If you really fine-tune everything in, you can get really close, in my opinion, to what is a film look. And again, ultimately, we're not going for necessarily emulation and perfection here. What we want is just like something that looks good, something that looks cool, something that is visually pleasing to us. And I think Dehancer does that really well. So that is, I guess, a positive. And let's talk about a few more. It's essentially, Dehancer is what I've been looking for in a plugin that will let me get close to a film look without having an insane amount of technical knowledge. The way I will use it in my YouTube videos going forward is I'll use it in Premiere Pro, drop it onto my footage, and just I know I'll get some like favorites and like some quick things that I'd like to do, but you have to use it in tandem with Lumetri as well on a per clip basis. You've got to make sure you're grading your clips well, but I just think it works really well as like a one-stop shop for like film emulation. Like it just looks really good. I don't really think I can say much more about it than that in terms of the positive. Like it works and it looks really good. The bloom and halation particularly I love as a way to get that directly in Premiere Pro. It's pretty insane. It just looks amazing. Let's maybe talk about some of the cons here. There aren't too many, to be honest, but most of them come from the fact that unfortunately it's a Premiere Pro plugin. And what I mean by that is I don't really like the way that it sits in the effect controls. There is a lot of text and it's all very text based and it doesn't translate very well visually. And I don't really like that. I know I've used Dehancer with Lightroom, Photoshop, and DaVinci, and I way prefer the way they all work with that. In Lightroom, it's a standalone plugin, and then in DaVinci, the interface is just much nicer. I don't know, I think it just looks better. Premiere just doesn't do a good job of handling it as a plugin, if that makes sense. Lastly, the biggest con of all, which is kind of the elephant in the room, is the cost. The cost of Dehancer is, as of right now, pretty high. They offer a few different options. You can buy it as a lifetime license, which grants it to you in, I assume, perpetuity, and you can just, they'll update it unless they release Dehancer 2, or you can download it as a subscription on a yearly, 6-monthly, or 3-monthly basis, I want to say, maybe even 1 month as well. I personally hate subscription-based software. The way that Adobe have kind of influenced that market is not great. I would always prefer to buy my software outright and be able to have access to it that way than to buy it as a subscription. Now, I know that it's better for the business and you get a lot more updates when it's a subscription, but it's just very expensive either way you do it. Now, as part of this review, I've also been given a affiliate link. So if you wanted to use that to offset some of the costs somehow, I'll put the code on the screen. But yeah, that is my biggest con with Dehancer, is it is very expensive, especially if you're a hobbyist. If you're just doing this for fun and you're not getting paid for your work, and no one's really going to care whether it looks like film or not, it's really hard to justify. So yeah, cost is the biggest con. The other thing you can do if you're struggling with the cost of the plugin is a lot of the effects can actually be done yourself. I'm fairly certain there's a way that you can like trick After Effects to do halation and then do it that way. Same for like bloom. I know that in DaVinci you can do like a bloom effect and stuff. So like you could find a way to maybe piecemeal everything together and get like a film look that way, but the biggest benefit is that it's a one-stop shop, so I guess that is why it's expensive. As kind of like a point of comparison, I'm also going to include a side-by-side clip of my footage graded with Dehancer in Premiere Pro, but then also graded with Juan Malara's Film Unlimited power grade for DaVinci, which I also bought with my own money a few years ago, and it's been really good. That's what I've been using in DaVinci as opposed to Dehancer, because I didn't buy it because it was very expensive. I got the trial a lot. So yeah, it's just up to you to kind of see which look you like best, and it shows that, you know, you can get the film look in a number of different ways. Bear in mind there could be some element of user error here. I'm not very skilled technically. I know what I like and the way I want it to look. It's just sometimes hard for me to get there. I was also asked to include a short note on the Dehancer iOS app. I actually used that the other day on a trial basis when I was testing out some of my Fujifilm straight out of camera recipe stuff. I was thinking like, oh, how would it look if I ran that through Dehancer? So I used the iOS app with the watermark, and unfortunately there's no way to remove the watermark unless you subscribe to it. It is available on a subscription model. I think it's a bit cheaper than the app itself, but again, it's the issue with subscription, so that is one negative. But what I would say is I was blown away by how good it is as an iPhone app at emulating film. If you want to get all the benefits of Dehancer without the cost of the standalone app, just like get a subscription to the iPhone one for a bit and just run everything through that. You can do so much with like CapCut. Like I was making reels in Instagram the other day. I just do it on my phone. It's crazy how far like iPhone filmmaking has kind of come. So yeah, I guess like have a look at the iOS app if you feel like this is all a bit too much for you. Anyway, that's my pretty long-winded review of Dehancer. Again, I was like pretty surprised that they reached out to me. This is a very small channel. I don't know what happened, but anyway, it's interesting for me to get that email, and I'm glad that I got it, and I get to play with Dehancer and explain to you guys, you know, the different things that you can do with it, I guess. I personally am going to be making a lot more content on this channel relating to maybe like pretty much photography, but I also would like to somehow include my cinematography and director of photography stuff, because that is kind of my career, as well as some like corporate video stuff. So yeah, I don't know what this channel's going to be, which isn't what you want to hear, but it's going to all be centered essentially around how to get a good image. And I will be using Dehancer for pretty much every YouTube video going forwards. I'm lazy. I like to do everything in Premiere, and to have it as a one-stop shop is really good. Thank you if you got this far. Thank you so much for watching. And yeah, if you could do the algorithm pleasing things like the video and subscribe and all that stuff, that would be great. Anyway, yeah, bye.